Wee-wee, it's a Loki overstock bonanza. We got tall Lokis, short Lokis, hammer Lokis, lady Lokis. We even have reptile Lokis. We got more Lokis than we can handle. We're passing the chaos on to you. We got the Loki you want. One Loki is kinda cool, if you're into that sort of thing. But you know what's really cool? A bunch of Lokis. Well, cool for us. For the people who have to deal with all the mischief a single Loki can get up to, multiple Lokis are a giant pain. The Time Variance Authority had their hands full with just 2, and now 4 more have popped up. Just who are these Lokis and what's their deal? Some we know and some we can put together. As for what they're up to, well, you never know with a Loki. Kid Loki is the easiest Loki to pick out of the havoc of Lokis. Oh, I'm just going to decide that a herd of Lokis is called a havoc. Not just because he's a kid dressed like Loki, but Kid Loki was high on the anticipation list for one of the potential outcomes of the Loki series. That's because Kid Loki has a fairly important history in the comics. The process in which adult Loki went the Benjamin Buttons route and peeled back the years is pure Loki. Just like his cinematic counterpart, Loki bounces back and forth between wanting some redemption and just wanting to cut somebody, with lots of room in between. While in general Loki can be trusted to be on Loki's side, he has some soft spots, and one of those is his adopted home Asgard. So when Asgard found itself floating a few hundred feet over Oklahoma for reasons, and Earth's defenses left in the hands of Norman Green Goblin Osborn for even worse reasons, Loki found himself both against and for Asgard with disastrous results. In the process, Loki was killed. As anyone would be aware by now, dying is for non-Lokis. This time he cheated death by having Hela remove his name from the books, so when he died he didn't end up in hell, but rather was reborn. Nice work if you can get it. Kid Loki didn't know he was Loki until his brother found him and caught him up. Mostly. Sadly for Kid Loki, the whole betrayal of Asgard from the past life Loki kind of stuck, and Asgardians were still upset about it, especially Odin. To make matters worse, he's haunted by the vision of his former adult self that he named Ekol, Loki spelled backwards. Ekol sort of intended for Kid Loki to be his way back, but Thor had talked Kid Loki into wanting to be a good guy. Despite some very well-earned trust issues, Kid Loki did manage to clock some good guy hours, even eventually joining the Young Avengers. The Young Avengers include Eli Bradley, the grandson of Isaiah Bradley, the secret super soldier, and we met Eli during Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Stature, better known as Cassie Lang, is the adorable daughter of Scott Lang. We first met her in the first Ant-Man movie. Miss America, America Chavez, joined the Young Avengers in the same way she's joining the cast of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Kate Bishop took over Hawkeye duties for the young team, and she'll be training with Clint Barton in the upcoming Hawkeye series. A pair of twins that shouldn't have happened, but their spirits ended up being born separately as real boys also joined. Their names were Billy and Tommy, or Speed and Wiccan, Scarlet Witch's impossible children who we met during WandaVision. That's 6 Young Avengers now already in the MCU. When the MCU got to 6 heroes to begin with, they formed the Avengers. Can Kid Loki make it a clean half dozen, or will that honor go to Ironheart or Miss Marvel? Of course, the Loki variant du jour has been the one Loki who doesn't like being called Loki at all. She seems okay with being called tech-savvy though. Sylvie might be adverse to the Loki name because she spent so little time as a Loki before becoming TVA's public enemy #1. Or she might not want to be a Loki because while she was indeed adopted by Odin, in her timeline it wasn't Laufey where Odin got her. Maybe that lost parentage is where Sylvie comes from, and she's really Sylvie Lushton. Sylvie Lushton thought she was an Asgardian because when Asgard was spending time as Oklahoma's umbrella, she got magical powers. She adopted an Asgardian accent like your friend who just spent a year studying abroad and moved to New York City to audition for the superhero big leagues. Only she wasn't Asgardian, and it wasn't even clear if she was real. Loki had given her powers and sort of implied he created her completely. She did eventually join a team, by the way, the Young Avengers, before joining Norman Osborn's Avengers and fighting against them. Redemption for a Loki is hard, but I mean, he really did look like he enjoyed taking that dude's eyeball, so there's a lot to redeem there. The Sylvie Enchantress racked up a pretty good career joining other bad guy groups and harassing the goodies, including the Young Avengers, before the original Enchantress showed up and was miffed that her name had been taken, sending Sylvie on a bit of a trial for her to earn the name. Not a trial that Amora, the original Enchantress, thought she could do. In the comics and the series, Sylvie is self-taught in that no one showed her how to use her powers. This also means she has no idea how far that power knob goes up. Given how well the last orphan with an undefined level of power and a powerful reason to feel sad turned out, it might be best not to make Sylvie mad or sad. The highlight in a very tense episode of Loki, where we saw everyone we've grown to like get the business end of the TVA's baton and the cohesion of the TVA task force start to crumble, an episode where we even met the Timekeepers, who predictably were just an elaborate Chuck E. Cheese-style animatronic show. The absolute highlight, without a doubt, was the sight of legendary actor Richard E. Grant dressed in a comic book-accurate Loki outfit. First of all, because Richard E. Grant's trademark dry, sarcastic wit is a perfect fit for a Loki. Enough that if this franchise had been born in the 90s, Grant would be an obvious choice. Mostly, though, it's that costume. It stands out in the MCU's tactical upgrade to the comic book look of the characters. The last we saw that kind of thing was as Halloween costumes for Wanda and Vision. Grant's Loki was billed as classic Loki and opens a lot of possibilities. All delightful. They range from just a guy who dressed up like Loki and got caught up in the TVA bureaucracy to the most exciting possibility that classic Loki is the bridge between Earth 616, otherwise known as the main Marvel timeline, and Earth 199999, otherwise known as the MCU, which is pretty crazy and pretty cool. Comic book Loki, as you can imagine, is just as much an integral part of the 616 timeline as the MCU Loki is the MCU. That includes Loki being the threat that caused the Avengers to form. The strangest Loki appearance wasn't the hologram of a Loki that looked like it had gotten into some of that Bruce Banner gamma radiation, and it wasn't even the Caiman with the Loki hat. Instead, it was the large Loki holding a hammer suspiciously like the one that's wielded by Loki's adopted brother Thor. In the credits, the actor who played him, Diobe Obure, is listed as Boastful Loki. His outfit was the least Loki-like and actually resembled the outfit that Thor wore in the nearly forgotten TV movie Trial of the Incredible Hulk that also featured Matt Murdock and the first Stan Lee cameo. Is he a Loki from a timeline without a Thor, so Loki was treated as the hero of Asgard before the TVA tried to prune him? Or just a Loki that was strong enough to break free of his brother's shadow? With a name like Boastful Loki and a hammer for swinging, he's likely to be a bit more Thor than Loki. Then there's the Caiman with a Loki hat. I know we're supposed to be deliberating on whether it's a crocodile or alligator, but both of those, alligatoroids, which is totally a word I just found out, are very large when they're an adult and Caimans are not. And this one was being held by Kid Loki. That is my non-naturalist assumption. That's a Caiman. There isn't really an instance of Loki living long-term as an alligatoroid of any kind, but there is the story of Simon Walterson, otherwise known as Throg, the Frog of Thunder. That happened after a series of events that involved Thor being turned into a frog by Loki and eventually a shard of Mjolnir finding a former football star turned frog who also happened to be worthy. Similar shenanigans might be responsible for Caiman or Crocodile Loki. That's a Caiman though, right? Pretty sure that's a Caiman. Or it could be one of Loki's Ragnarok-induced offspring, the world serpent Jormungand. Yeah, Loki fathered both Jormungand and Fenris because he's a shapeshifter. I'm sure that makes sense. This means that Loki has beat Thor at his own game, or Doctor Doom's game manipulating Thor. Alternate Thors made up the Thor Corps and acted as Doctor Doom's enforcers on the battleworld. Maybe the Havoc of Lokis will end up fighting the Council of Kangs. How cool would that be?